Hey, seventh grade. I went on vacation a couple summers ago to Greece, and I visited the island of Patmos. It was a revelation. Although when my sister showed up, it was more like the apocalypse. I'm just glad she doesn't watch these videos. Otherwise, I'd be in big trouble. All right, one more joke. So the four gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are all together, and the resurrected Jesus appears to them in a vision. How did Jesus start his speech to them? He said, "Mark my words." All right, so dumb. We are doing our final content of the school year. We're going to be learning about 1 John. So St. John, the apostle, is an author of a lot of New Testament material. So he wrote the Gospel of John. He wrote the Apocalypse. It's also called the Book of Revelation sometimes. And he also wrote 3 epistles, 3 of what we would call the Catholic letters. So remember, the Catholic letters are the 7 New Testament epistles we know for sure were not written by St. Paul. We know St. Paul wrote 13 of them for sure. We know that he did not write 7 of them. 3 of them are authored by St. John. And then the last one, the letter to the Hebrews, some people say St. Paul wrote it. Others say he didn't. I don't really know. I don't have an opinion on it right now. Maybe I will. Check with me next year. Maybe I'll have an opinion by then. But yeah, we're going to be talking about 1 John. 1 John is John's largest Catholic letter. 2nd and 3rd John are much, much shorter. So 2nd John is kind of like a first draft of 1 John. But he still sent it out separately as an epistle. And then 3rd John is more like an administrative letter. So it talks about personnel issues in the church. All right. So most of the doctrine that is not in, that John wants to preach, that's not in his gospel and not in the apocalypse, you're going to find here in 1 John. Okay. So who was John? Well, we know that he was an apostle, so he's one of the 12. He was Jesus' closest companion. He's the only apostle who did not abandon Jesus at his crucifixion, so he was present at the foot of the cross alongside Mary and other women while Jesus was being crucified. Like I said, he authored the Gospel of John, the Apocalypse, and 3 Catholic letters. John was the youngest apostle. So he was probably like 17, 18, 19 when Jesus began his earthly ministry, which would put him in his early 20s at the latest when Jesus resurrected and ascended into heaven. So he's a really young guy. He's also the only apostle who did not die a violent death. He suffered a lot in his life. He was exiled to the island of Patmos, which is in the Aegean Sea. It's a rocky island, and he lived there for a while. This is where he authored, well, according to most accounts, the island of Patmos is probably where he authored the Apocalypse and 2nd John, and maybe all 3 of his epistles were written on the island of Patmos. And then at the end of his life, he was freed from his exile and he lived in Ephesus. Oh, it says here he wrote the 3 Catholic letters in Ephesus. I read somewhere else that he might have written 2nd John while still on Patmos, which would mean he might have written parts of 1 John on Patmos. But I'm going to go with what's on the slides, we're going to say that he wrote his 3 Catholic letters while in Ephesus. All right, so who is John writing to? He's writing to the entire Christian church in 1 John. Right? He's writing to the entire Christian church in general. He's not writing to a specific church, a specific group of people, or a specific person. He's writing to all Christians, and his purpose is pretty simple. He wants to warn them about a danger that has emerged in the early church. And this danger, of course, is that posed by the false teachers. So John tries to show why the teachings of these false teachers are dangerous and are false, and he wants Christians to persevere in their moral beliefs in the face of them. John specifically wants to address their teachings about Christ, who Christ is, because a lot of these false teachers support a heresy called Cerinthianism, or sometimes it's pronounced Cerinthianism. I say Cerinthianism. I don't know which is the right way. Cerinthians say that Jesus and Christ were 2 separate beings, right? So they say that Jesus was not incarnated. He was just born of Mary. So Joseph was his biological father, and he got Mary pregnant, and Jesus was born to them. And then they believe that when Jesus was baptized, the second person of the Trinity entered into his body, right? And that's when he became Jesus Christ. And then they say when Jesus was crucified, the second person of the Trinity left his body. So when Jesus says, my God, why have you abandoned me, or why have you forsaken me on the cross? Cerinthians interpreted that to mean Jesus is saying, why did Christ leave me? Because Christ has already left his body at that point, right? So this is some weird Gnostic stuff that these Cerinthians believe, right? And John is saying it's all false. Don't listen to any of it. They are wrong, right? Jesus and Christ are one and the same. They're one and the same because of the incarnation. In the incarnation, the second person of the Trinity took on flesh and was conceived in his mother's womb. And the second person of the Trinity remained with the human body of Jesus Christ throughout his earthly life. And that his earthly body is still united to him in heaven. This is what the church teaches, which is the opposite of Cerinthians. So Cerinthianism was a Gnostic heresy. We learned a little bit about Gnostics earlier. But basically, Gnostics believe a lot of complicated things. They've been around in different forms for 2 millennia. But basically, one main idea that Gnostics have is that matter is bad. So human bodies, flesh, blood, these are not good. And so they reject the idea that God could truly take on matter as part of his essential being, right? They think that God can inhabit matter. God can possess someone, can live inside of someone's body, but they don't think that God could actually have matter. Right? So Gnostics generally believe that matter is evil. By the way, I think this picture here is a picture of the ruins of Ephesus. I was trying to remember what it was. I don't think this is Patmos. I think this is Ephesus. This is a sketch of St. John trying to get away from Cerinthians. So this is like a Cerinthian meeting place, and St. John is trying to get away from them, right? Because he's saying basically it's toxic to be around them, right? Heresies are contagious, so we need to get away. All right, so Cerinthians say the incarnation was not possible because God would never become matter, and Jesus was just a regular baby when he was born, and then God inhabited his body when he became baptized. Okay, now, so let me clarify something. All Cerinthians are Gnostics, but not all Gnostics are Cerinthians. It's kind of like all people who live in Los Angeles are Californians, but not all Californians live in Los Angeles, right? Gnostic is a big umbrella term that covers a lot of different groups. Cerinthians is just one group, right? So there's other types of Gnostics out there. So if you see the word Gnostic referred to, it doesn't always mean Cerinthian. Cerinthians are just the ones that John was most concerned with, right? So all Gnostics are false teachers, right? If they're from within the church, they're heretics. If they're outside of the church, they're just preaching things that are false. They teach that they have this special knowledge of God outside of the authority of the church, right? They think that their intellect, their knowledge of God brings them with a special unity with God that Christians don't have. Gnostics comes from the Greek word gnosis, which means knowledge. So that's how you can remember that. Gnostics are really dangerous. They're dangerous in the early church, and they're still dangerous today. Why are they dangerous? Because on the outside, from the outside, Gnostics just appear like kind of weird Christians, like quirky Christians, people who really, really are intense about their Christian faith, but might believe a few strange things here and there. So they seem kind of harmless by all appearances. But in reality, what they're teaching is antithetical to Christianity, and it's very, very dangerous. Right? Gnostics still exist today. They publish books like these. Like Jesus had all these secret teachings, and there's these other gospels out there that nobody knows about that aren't in the Bible because the church prevented them from being in the Bible. This is a Gnostic altar. I believe this symbol back here, I could be wrong, in between Jesus and Mary, I believe this symbol here is a Gnostic symbol. So yeah, I'm pretty sure this is a Gnostic altar. It's not Catholic. So the Gnostics that John is talking about believed that their special knowledge of God meant that they did not have to follow the Ten Commandments, nor did they have to follow Christian morality. All right. So the Gnostics, the Cerinthians of John's time, were living very immoral lives, and John is going to call them out on it. All right. We're going to stop there, and then I'll introduce 1 John, and we'll go into chapter 1 in the next video.